Sego Agwego, greetings in Mohawk to all of us.
Yate, She Kellian Staggers Unishe, Ofta Anishe. My name is Kellian Staggers. I am a senior in Columbia College. I identify as a member of the Navajo Nation as well as African American.
Shetoglini Nishle, Nashashe Bashishchi. I am born for the Water Flows Together people. I am from the Bear Clan. In that way, I am a Navajo woman. Columbia University, Morningside Heights, all sits on Lenni Lenape and Wappinger people land. To be more specific, Manhattan means island of many hills in the Lenni Lenape language. So this whole presence, almost all of New York that we sit on, is on Indigenous land.
On Indigenous Peoples Day, I will dress up in my traditional wear, which includes my sash belt, my moccasins. I try to wear all my jewelry, like my rings, my necklaces, my earrings, and everything like that, just to show, basically, since I'm in New York and not a lot of people know that Indigenous people still exist, just to show that my existence, I'm still here.
I am Kanaka Maoli, or Native Hawaiian, as well as Japanese. And I have to say, being an older person, I'd gotten so used to not celebrating Columbus Day that I didn't really substitute any kind of rituals or any sort of way of marking that day differently. That said, I think it's really important that we do recognize Indigenous Peoples Day.
New York City is home to the largest Indigenous community probably in North America. So, I mean, this is a huge city, it's a metropolitan city, and it is the home to many, many Indigenous peoples. But on top of that, there are Indigenous reservations that are around us that are also in upstate New York, and we could have relationships with them that are formal. We also have representatives of many nations that come here and go to school. So there are diplomatic ties that have been established in that way with these nations.
The Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act was enacted by Congress in 1990, and the point of the act was to give Native American and Indigenous communities in the United States, Alaska, and Hawaii the opportunity to begin to reclaim objects that were in cultural institutions across the United States. We have a collection of approximately 500 objects, cultural heritage objects, and artworks that are classified as Native American. Our collection is, again, supporting educational programming, and so what we hope is that we're going to be able to work with various communities and begin the actual consultations that will come next, and that this will help engage more and more activity on campus to bring more students and make them aware, as well as the community at large, to the greater responsibility of what we have in this collection and what Columbia's role and responsibility in working with Indigenous communities actually is over these objects.
So often when we think about Native heritage, we see it as something that no longer exists, that there is no living semblance of that heritage.
American society is hugely underinformed about the existence and history of Native Americans. I believe the education system has a big responsibility for that, and I mean from elementary school onwards. People in the US should know the history of colonization, land grabbing, and deliberate policies and practices of physical and cultural erasure of Native Americans. They should be able to recognize such practices to the extent that they continue today. In other words, there is a profound need for the country to visibly recognize and reconcile with its past and to draw conclusions about what it has to do from now on.
When we continue to think about Native people as only having existed in the past, then we are continuing that act of erasure, which it is critically important that we stop that we no longer erase Native people. We need to tell their stories and understand their histories from the past, but we also need to recognize that Native people are here with us.
As someone who was trained in Caribbean studies more than 2 decades ago, we really were taught that indigenous people had disappeared from the region and that there was really not much to learn from people studying that field. And what I learned doing that is that it's impossible to really work in Latino studies or in Caribbean studies without a foundation in indigenous studies.
Because Colombia sits on indigenous territory that has been dispossessed from indigenous peoples, it can do much more than simply honor their heritage on one day. So there can be more of a structural, and I would rather say there should be more of a structural commitment to the teaching of indigenous studies, to the teaching of indigenous peoples and their allies all throughout the university. And not only that, a deeper relationship with the communities that are in and around New York City.
The student activists led to the formation of the Center for the Study of Ethnicity and Race. That's very important. Without that space, we do not have a real indigenous studies area of space and sort of focus.
The Native American Council was founded in 1996, and so the Native American Council is open to both Indigenous and Native students, as well as allies, and currently we have about over 30 or so Indigenous tribes, groups represented. And it's usually in conjunction with Malama Hawaii, who also has an Indigenous presence here on campus.
Once we started building Indigenous studies at the center, is that more and more Indigenous students became part of the community of the center. And the students immediately became shapers of what was going on pedagogically at the center. They helped to design a class about what were some of the challenges facing Native communities in the US were. And there came a point in that process where they were sitting around a seminar room talking about this and feeling that talking about it wasn't enough, that they actually had to start creating projects to address what they were learning and to share it, circulate it, and address it. And as a result, they created a project called Alternative Education, where they created a curriculum to teach young people in various reservations, not only about Indigenous studies and history, but also how they could imagine themselves being part of a university community in the future.
Indigenous studies was a huge reason to why I wanted to come to Columbia, because that was something new and that was something that was being offered. So that's a huge milestone for Indigenous students to engage here at Columbia.
The approval and production and placement of the Lenape plaque, which happened in 2016, and all came about because of student activism.
In my 12 years here, I have seen an incredible amount of energy and strategy and collaboration across the faculty and among the students that's both directed at making Columbia a better place for Indigenous people, but also to use Columbia's incredible intellectual power to mobilize an understanding of Indigenous issues in the present.
Columbia took a big step in accepting and honoring Indigenous Peoples Day. Our Native American Council worked really hard, and it was a process of over 2 years to get the university to accept. But we hope that the university will continue to honor this by not only planning other events, but supporting the Indigenous groups that we have, like Native American Council, but also Malama Hawaii, and continuing to support our efforts in trying to educate the rest of the student body about Indigenous issues.
What I want, and I know Columbia is in the process of doing this, is to expand Indigenous presence and an Indigenous belonging here on campus.
Our existence is our resistance, right? To say that we're still here, we're part of modernity and modern life, contemporary life, as well as to inform non-Indigenous peoples, right, of the long history of Indigenous peoples.
My existence as an Indigenous person is dedicated to furthering an understanding of our history, our culture, and our struggles in the present. It's my entire body of research, it's my future research, it's my teaching, and my pedagogy. So it is not just one day for me, it's my life.